I am very excited today to be here with Vicki Znavor, who is the author of Authenticity Reawakened, a really amazing book that really reminds us and teaches us what it is to bring your authentic self to the workplace. Vicki, I'm so excited about this book. This is your
Thank you.
first book, right?
Yes, thank you. And I'm so excited to join you today, Mary.
Great. Well, tell us what prompted you to write this book after this wonderful career in corporate America?
Yeah. I was not intending to write about authenticity at all. And when I left my last position in March of 2020, I knew that I wanted to write a book, but I had no idea the topic. And so I just sort of reflected about it. And I talked to my future publisher about it. And she said, write about something that one, you feel really passionate about, and two, that you seem to know something about. So I asked colleagues and friends and family members, what do you think the hallmark of my leadership over a 40-year career has been? And inevitably, time and time again, people responded with, you've always brought your true self to work. And not only did you bring your true self to work, but by doing so, you enabled us to bring our true selves to work too. And that was an important element of my leadership for them. And upon reflection, I thought, gosh, I guess it is a superpower, if you will, to show up at work as who you are and have the courage to do that. So I dove right in. I did a lot of research about authenticity and learned so much from the work that many researchers have done. And indeed, the research has found that there is no true definition of authenticity, but we sure know it when we see it.
We sure do. And it is so refreshing when we do see it, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, one of the things that we do in our coaching practice is we tell people you've got to be authentic to who you are, because if you're not, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to the company, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yes.
yeah, go ahead.
No, and to your life. So I think that this is the other thing, is that if you need to reflect upon why authenticity is important, and my definition for authenticity is deciding who you are and how you're going to show up in a world to the extent that reflects who you are, to the extent that you wish to do so. So, we certainly don't, and I'm sure in your coaching with your clients, you're not advocating that they come to work and tell their whole life story, but it is important that you know who you are and that you choose how you're going to show up. So anything less than that, at the end of your life, and I'm at the stage of my life where I probably have more time behind me than ahead, I would say I want to be proud of how I showed up. And that is, if I'm talking to my children and my grandchildren and saying, I had the courage to show up as myself, and to help other people, because that's a personal value, to help other people succeed. That's a personal value that was important to me. If I can say I did that, that's a life well lived.
I love that. A life well
Thank you.
lived. That
Mm-hmm.
is beautiful.
Thank you.
And I also love one of the first exercises in your book is you challenge people to look in the mirror and say, who am I?
Yeah, that's a powerful exercise. And, if you really look in your eyes, and, of course, all of us look in a mirror every single day when we're getting ready for work, but do we really see ourselves? That's the question. So doing this exercise where you're looking in the mirror and you're saying, who am I? And then standing there long enough to feel the answer. Am I showing up for my friends, my family, my colleagues, myself in the way that I know is really important and valuable to me? And if the answer is great, that's wonderful. Yes, I'm showing up that way. Pat yourself on the back and say, yes, I'm so proud. And if there are areas that the answer is no, then ask yourself, what am I going to do about it? And what are the specific steps I'm going to take to move forward?
Which is really a daunting question if you're asking yourself that. But by reading this book, you lay out steps for people to actually help become their more authentic selves at the office and in life, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it starts with small things. Think about building muscles. There are some very small things. Once you decide, am I showing up in the way that matters most to me? If the answer is no, then say, well, what would really help? what would be one small thing that I can do starting immediately? And, one good thing I think to start is if you mean no, if you want to say no, don't say maybe or I'll think about it, which a lot of times we do at work. Say no. You can say it politely, but say no. If you say yes, also, this is really important. If you say yes, keep your word and follow through and do what you committed to doing.
Great. Yes, so much of it is about just being very clear in your own convictions about what you believe in, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So you talk about these pivotal moments in people's career, right?
Mm.
And you've had a lot of them after reading your book and speaking with you, just in general. But we talk about pivots all the time, right? All of us as coaches and HR executives. But tell me about some very pivotal moments in your career that really helped shape the direction that you went and the direction that you took this book.
Yeah. Well, I will say most of my pivotal moments have been life moments that have actually influenced decisions I made in my career. So, for example, when I was a child, my family lost our home to foreclosure. I was around 12 years old. And that for sure is a pivotal moment in anyone's life when that happens. But what I took away from that experience was one, you recover from things for sure. Sometimes when negative things happen to us, in fact, oftentimes when negative things happen to us, uh, a positive experience could only have happened because of that negative experience. So, if we want to translate that to a work experience, if you lose your job, oftentimes the universe was nudging you all along that this wasn't the place for you, this wasn't the job for you. And we don't listen. And so something bigger happens. We end up losing our job and we say, wow. And in fact, most of the people I've talked to who have lost their jobs have said, thank goodness that happened to me because I went on to really examine what was important to me and to do the work that was much more meaningful. So, having lost our home, I ended up moving to a town that was extremely nurturing. It's still the town I think of as my true home. Friends who have been my friends since I was 12 years old. I saw models of families that were much more healthy than my own, but helped me to become the parent and adult that I am today. In terms of fiscal responsibility, which was a big part of obviously being an executive, fiscal responsibility taught me about that. It also taught me great empathy so that when you're seeing people having a difficult time at work, you understand some of those things because you've been through them yourself and you can reach across the table and help somebody else on perhaps the worst day of their life at work. So, not all of our moments in our lives are pivotal, but each one of us, if we take the time, we could probably pinpoint 5 to 7 pivotal moments in our lives where we can say, aha, that's why I do that. That's why this value is so key to who I am.
Very good. Absolutely. And you talk about people who've lost their jobs, and we call it,
Mhm.
the gift in strange wrapping paper,
Ah,
right?
I
And
love that.
there's a lot of people who have lost their jobs recently, right? Just
Mhm.
in the past year. So what advice would you give to somebody who's struggling on that front right now?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we can all spend time in the past, and there's certainly I would say, first of all, understand that when you have a loss like that, you are going to grieve, and grief is very a strange partner in life. You have highs and lows. You have to go through all the cycles of grief, all the stages. And you can't skip them, but they might not all go in the same order, and a lot of them repeat themselves. So that's one thing. Just know the experience. Certainly use any outplacement support that you get. I think that that's so important. And a lot of times people kind of skip that thinking, oh, I don't know, I'm going to really get much out of it, but you will get something out of it.
Mhm.
But mostly look forward. My husband always says, only look backwards if that's where you want to go. And I think that that's such great advice. Look forward, but then think to yourself, what worked for me in my past experience, my past work, and what didn't. And if I could create my own existence going forward, what would that look like? Now, I also want to say I never sugarcoat anything that, financial health is important, and we don't always have that. I mean, most of us and most of the people in our country are really, living almost paycheck to paycheck. So we all have to earn a living. So you may not have the dream job right after, but it doesn't mean it will never happen. So plan your future, because the future is going to come no matter what. And you want to make sure that you have some say, even if it's, I'm going to sit down and identify who I want to work for, the general location. Maybe your commute's awful now. You could think about that, whatever it might be. Obviously in COVID, we're all working at home, but try to craft as much of your future experience as you can, and then be deliberate about it. Don't give up.
I think you're absolutely right, Vicki. Keeping a hold of your vision for the future. And I love that idea of just looking forward, right?
Yes.
And to what's next. It could be a stepping stone to that next perfect job, right?
That's right.
The next job might not be the perfect one, but it could be leading you to something even better.
That's right. And that certainly happened to me before.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I worked, most of my career was at Sara Lee. And then, I would say in 2009, I left Sara Lee, and that was, we were in the thick of the financial crisis at that point. And I did the exercise that I sort of recommended a while ago, is that I sat down and I said, where do I want to work and what kind of people? And took probably 7 months. Again, it was a very difficult time. And I landed at Northern Trust, and I worked with a great team of people there. And I did some really cool things. In HR, I was able to work on developing a competency model for leadership. And I went into learning and development. I had never really been in learning development before. And I stayed there for 3 years, made a lot of connections in banking. Also, I would say in my 7 months that I wasn't working, I did some work with HERMAC, a volunteer organization, and we helped HR leaders who were in transition at the time. Well, I made an important connection there. So then when I was at Northern Trust, the head of HR at the private bank, she was retiring and she was looking for somebody who could replace her. And she contacted the person that I was partnered with at HERMAC to say, do you know anybody? And the person recommended me. And I ended up going on to head up HR for the private bank at the time. And I would never have had that experience if I hadn't been willing to go from consumer packaged goods to banking and hadn't volunteered my time with HERMAC.
Right. Which is an incredible story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's great because it's all about the power of your network, right? And
yes.
Our networks can be very powerful. And you went to go volunteer, which is another thing we talk about a lot, is when you are look for ways to help, and you ask. Yeah.
Yes. And that is so important. And that's another thing. If you even think about just being, working at work, and maybe some people say, oh, this job or this company or whatever, ask yourself, what can I do to make it better? And then take a step, whether it's engaging more effectively in business resource councils, or arranging a volunteer activity for the food bank, or whatever it might be. There are always things that you can do to make it better, not only for yourself, but for other people. Or something simple. When you walk in the door in the morning, ask someone how they are, and then stand there and listen for the answer.
What means can I do to make it better? Yes.
Yes.
And it's a simple question.
Right? Yes.
If the rest of the world could just say, what can I do to make it better? We'd all hopefully be in a little bit of a better spot. So
yes.
I'm going to jump to the other side, Vicki, because in chapter 9, you talk about letting go. And I know that it's a concept that was really interesting to read about. So tell me why it's important to you.
Well, letting go, and I would say that it's so important to let go of any illusion of who you're supposed to be. Let go of the weight that you give to other people's opinions about who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to show up. Letting go, we talked a little bit about grief. If you've lost your position or something like that, letting go of that past of that, so that you can move forward. Letting go is really, really important. You know, a lot of times during, especially now that it's springtime, we think about spring cleaning and things like that. In a way, it's a little bit like that, spring cleaning, cleaning out the things that no longer serve you, but maybe had just become a habit.
That's great. Thank you. And I think that's
Mhm.
really good because there are so many things, even this year, right, that people were forced to let go. And
Yes,
there are ways that now people are saying, okay, I want to keep letting go of that and add more, of the good stuff. And
you bet.
yeah, and the stuff that actually resonates with them, which is what happens when you are true to your authentic self.
Right. That's right. And you know, I know even in banking, for example, and I am doing some work now with a financial services firm, and there was always this perception that you could never work at home, that you know you wouldn't be able to be productive. And now we've learned, gosh, you really can. So I think people are starting to understand the value of sitting down with your family at dinner, the value of being able to just say, I've got to go to, I, or not, I gotta, not I have to go, I get to go to my child's recital or, baseball game or whatever it might be. I think people are starting to understand that the world doesn't fall apart because somebody wasn't sitting at their desk for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Absolutely. I think that the past year and a half has humanized business.
It has.
hmm in a great way. So, what do you see for the future as we move into maybe more of a hybrid or distributed workforce?
Mhm. Well, for sure, I think that working from home is definitely part of the future way we work, without a doubt. I also think that the flexibility in scheduling will be something that we know that we can learn to live with and should. People's lives are dynamic and we need to accommodate those things. I also think that we've got a new emphasis on mental health. And I'm so happy to see that because it's been a long time coming. And mental health, especially when we think about the proliferation of weapons in our society, mental health becomes much more important to the workplace. And also the bringing humanity to work a bit, because oftentimes, especially when things go wrong at work, we've seen some horrific incidents of late. Indianapolis would be an example where there were probably some signs, and understanding how do you identify when someone's going off the rails a bit and needs some extra support, and then how do you protect employees at work? People should feel safe and protected, and I think that we're learning more about what that looks like, and that will be a big part of the dynamic going forward.
That's great. Yeah. And I
Mhm.
think you're absolutely right. I mean, the emphasis on wellness and mental health is imperative.
Yes, yes, it is.
Vicki, you worked in corporate America, you raised three daughters. By all intents and purposes, you had it all. How did you do it?
I had three daughters, and I went to school for years to night school. I didn't go to school in the traditional way, so I was going to school. I was raising my family. I was working full time, and now when I look back on that, I think, oh my gosh, I certainly didn't feel like I was doing things perfectly, but I see a lot of young parents today. They're trying to do it all. And, Brenda Barnes, when I was at Sara Lee, she was the CEO at Sara Lee for a while there. And she was, a working mom too, and all parents are working, honestly, whether you're in the home or out. But she said, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time. And oftentimes we don't listen to that advice. We think that we really can be, Superman or Superwoman and do it all, but you really can't. So I would say this goes back to values. And the older I've gotten, the more I firmly believe this. Your values are so important to know what they are. My book helps you identify what they are, know what they are, so that, I'll give you a quick example. I used to think that I was being judged if my children weren't perfect. So I worked day and night to make sure that their clothes were ironed, their meals were perfect, the home was perfect, and I was killing myself. And my mother-in-law said, do you really need to iron your baby's clothes? And what I would say now is that absolutely, I didn't need to do that. And, I think understanding that it's okay to let things slip a little. It's okay if the dishes are in the sink tonight and if you have a choice to go out and play with your children, definitely do that. And also ask for help and have a voice to ask for help. One of the things that's so great now, there's a lot of negatives about social media, but now there are groups that you can have that we didn't have back when my children were little, where you can find people who are going through the same things that you are. And you can, get additional ideas and support that way. I think there's a little bit more dialogue about it at work. There's business resource councils that address, young parenthood and things like that. And then give yourself a break, because you know what? Perfection doesn't exist. It took me a long time to figure that out. I wish it did. It doesn't. It's a big illusion. So give yourself a break. Find some time every single day, even if it's 10 minutes, to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And that actually leads me to my next thought was at the end of your book, you have these 100 tips.
Mhm.
And so much of what you talked about is, bringing your true self to the workforce and to your home. But one of those big things was self-care.
Yes.
And I thought that was really interesting. I loved the first one about being grateful for one thing when you get out of bed. But tell me, there were so many that I loved. I mean, so many that just resonated with me. So tell me maybe your top five. What top five out of the 100 tips?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really tough, but I will say this chapter was the most enjoyable chapter that I wrote, because I didn't change one word. I sat down and I just did 100, and I didn't change one single thing. And that's really unusual when you write a book, for those of you who are aspiring to do so. I would say that ask yourself once a week what you're proud of, and listen for the answer. And if you have three things that you're proud of, for example, really be proud of that and say, I am so proud I showed up that way, and own it.
Mhm.
If instead you think about something that you did that you weren't proud of, make it right. What will it take to make it right? And most things we can make right. So I would say do that. If somebody interrupts you, say, excuse me, I wasn't finished speaking. So, don't let your voice get, overtaken by somebody else. Another one is ask for help. There's nothing wrong in asking for help. We all need it. And oftentimes when we see somebody ask for help, we feel more empowered to ask for help as well. So ask for help. I think it's great. Read a book. you know I think, right now, there you go, read my book. I think reading helps you expand your thinking, and read something that really challenges you. Or if you've been working really hard and you need some relief, I found such great release by reading fun novels and things like that. It's perfectly good to give yourself some time off. And then say you're sorry, but only if you mean it. So that's a big one. I think in particular, women we say we're sorry all the time, and even when we have nothing to be sorry for. So think about that. Catch yourself when you're saying I'm sorry at work, and say, should I have said I'm sorry? But if you are sorry about something and you genuinely mean it, say you're sorry and mean it with all your heart, and then don't do whatever it is that you did to cause you to be sorry again.
Such powerful, simple wisdom.
Yeah, simple wisdom.
We could all put it into play, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But you also talk about, and you talked about this a little bit earlier too, about the power of saying no.
It's very powerful. Yeah. I mean, we all want to say yes all the time, and oftentimes we say yes, and then it takes away our time and attention from things that are much more important to us. Or we say yes and we simply don't have the time. We would love to say yes and we say it, but we don't have the time to actually follow through. And then that really does sort of give a bad impression, or sort of chip away at our integrity.
Hmm. So, what advice would you give HR leaders now moving into
Mhm.
this hybrid workforce?
Well, there's a reason why the first word in human resources is human. So look at people as and feel, literally feel that there's a person sitting across from you. I was on a podcast recently and I said, if HR leaders get to where they're so good at letting people go from their jobs that I've heard HR people actually say, I can say the speech, without even thinking about it. If that's you, your time in HR is probably expired. It should expire because we should not ever forget that people across the table are human beings. And also think about our policies, our procedures, our practices, those things. How do they really support the humans at our office? And you know what? I just want to give a shout out to human resources because I think we take a lot of slack. I've heard people say, oh, HR needs to have their seat at the table. We've had the seat at the table a long time. And there are a lot, many, many, many thousands of amazing human resources people, human resources employees who are working their butts off day and night to make their workplaces great. And so I would say, own that. You've done an amazing job and you have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, really, really great shout out. And I think you're right. And you're a perfect example of somebody who worked very hard to have a seat at the table and really deserved that seat when
Yeah.
you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. Which is great.
Thank
And
you.
what about business leaders? I mean, HR leaders are business leaders, but any additional advice for business leaders as well?
Yeah, HR isn't owned by HR. So, we all have a responsibility to our people. It's the biggest part of the balance sheet. And so, in most organizations. So, think about human beings. And also, I think, we think about leadership as being some grand, um, there's some grand definition of leadership. Well, the best part of leadership is showing up as who you are, talking to your people, being honest and direct with them, and hoping that you can play some role in their development and their achievement. So, I think if you do those things, I think that your leadership will only continue to grow and make a difference in your organization. We've got to get back to basics. I think we've lost ourselves a little bit in some of these. We've had so much information to us, sent to us that we've lost what the basic, how does it show up? How does leadership show up? Well, you should want people to follow you. And people want to follow people who are thoughtful about decision making and direct and helpful and care about the people behind them.
Absolutely. And we always say there's such a big difference between a leader and a manager, right?
Absolutely.
The leaders are the ones, like you said, who people want to get behind them and people will go to bat for them and they inspire people to
Right.
grow in their own roles.
Yes, yes. And it's such a gift to other people. Inevitably, I think all leaders, you want to help other people, you really do, but sometimes we just get lost on along the way. And this is why your authentic self is so important, sort of checking in, what kind of leader do I want to be, how do I want to show up for people, and am I doing that?
Right. And that check in the mirror that we talked about in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
how often should you be doing that?
Well, I would never prescribe a specific amount of time, but I would say when you're off balance, that's a really good time. You know it when you're not yourself. When you're not showing up the way you want to show up. You feel it. You can't sleep at night sometimes. You feel it in your bones. You start the day sometimes with, oh, I've got to go to work or whatever that might be. When you're feeling that way, for sure do that. But if you want to check in, maybe make it a ritual. Hey, I'm going to check in on my birthday. Every birthday, I'm going to make sure that I check into the mirror and say, did I live the last year the last year of my life the way that is in alignment with my values and what really matters to me? And maybe that's a longer standing in the mirror, but stand there and listen for the answer. Up to
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
that standing in the mirror can be awkward. And,
Yeah,
it's another lesson in authenticity, right?
it sure is. It sure is.
For sure. Yeah, it's one of those things, even when I sit with a client, well, or when I'm on a Zoom with a client,
Uh-huh.
I take a pause about 5 minutes beforehand and I just say, all right, give me the right words to make sure that I'm having the biggest impact on this human being.
I love that. And you know what? The word that I would use for that is really checking in with your intention. And that's such
Mhm.
a powerful word and process, is to ask yourself, what's my intention? Am I here to help someone and share information that's important? And that's what you did. And that's what you continue to do. I love your book club, and I love the information that you've shared with all of us. It's been phenomenal.
Oh, thank you, Vicki.
No,
That's so
thank
nice.
you. No, thank
Thank
you.
you for sharing this with all of
Thank you.
us. It is a
Thank you.
must read, and I'm just so excited for you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I really appreciate it.